Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Before we dive into the video, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell icon. Let's dive in. The late autumn sun poured its last golden light through the lace curtains, casting long shadows across the living room. Margaret Hale stood by the window, buttoning her navy blue coat, her reflection faint in the glass. At 63, she had grown used to silence, the kind that echoed after her husband's passing. But tonight wasn't meant for silence. Tonight was dinner at her son Daniel's house, something she always looked forward to with a tender eagerness. She moved about her home with slow precision, double-checking everything the way only widows do when no one else lives there. The front door latch clicked twice. The back window slid shut with a sigh. She even kissed the framed photo of her late husband, Richard, before leaving, a habit she could never abandon. Her house smelled faintly of lavender polish and old wood, the comforting scent of decades gone by. The clock struck 6. She smiled, picked up her lemon pie, and stepped into the cool evening. Cook 1 *, I left for dinner at my son's. Then the cleaning lady called, "Someone is in your house." The world outside seemed peaceful, unaware that within a few hours her home would no longer feel like her own. Dinner at Daniel's was filled with laughter and warmth. Leela, her daughter-in-law, flitted between the kitchen and table, always smiling a little too perfectly. Daniel's voice was cheerful, but Margaret noticed he checked his phone too often, something that tugged faintly at her chest. Still, she ignored it. Tonight, she was simply a mother surrounded by family. Then her phone buzzed on the table. The screen read Rosa, her cleaning lady. Margaret almost ignored it, but the tremor in Rosa's voice sent a chill through her veins. "Mrs. Hale," Rosa whispered. "Someone is in your house." For a heartbeat, Margaret couldn't move. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a breath. "I saw them through the kitchen window," Rosa stammered. "A shadow, tall, wearing gloves. I thought you were home, but the lights were off." The pie turned to stone in Margaret's stomach. She had locked everything she knew she had. Yet Rosa wouldn't mistake something like this. "Get out of there," Margaret ordered, her voice breaking. "Go now, call the police." As the call ended, Margaret's heart pounded in her chest. Around her, Daniel's laughter faded into the distance. The evening that had started with warmth now tasted like metal and dread. Cook 2 *, the police came, but what they found wasn't random. Someone knew exactly what to steal. By the time Margaret reached her street, flashing blue and red lights painted the night. Her heart hammered as the police moved through her front yard, their radios crackling, the once peaceful house now surrounded by officers. She stood frozen by the gate, the lemon pie still clutched in her trembling hands, its crust cracked like her calm. "Mrs. Hale, please stay back," one of the officers said gently. "We're making sure it's clear inside." She nodded numbly. Her home, her safe, quiet refuge, was now a crime scene. After what felt like hours, the officer returned. "No one's here now," he said. "Looks like they left in a hurry." When Margaret stepped inside, her breath caught. Drawers had been pulled open. Photo frames lay shattered on the floor, and her husband's old study, the one room she still kept untouched, had been ransacked. It wasn't just a burglary. It was a violation. "What did they take?" Daniel asked softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Margaret's eyes scanned the mess. The TV was still there. The silver cutlery remained untouched, but the small jewelry box that sat on her dresser, gone. The watch Richard wore every day before he died, missing. A box of old letters she'd hidden under her bed, gone too. Only things that meant something to her. The police officer frowned. "It's strange," he said, jotting notes in his pad. "Whoever did this wasn't after cash or electronics. They knew what to take." Margaret's throat tightened. The air in the room felt heavier, almost suffocating. When she turned to answer, her gaze met Leela's. Her daughter-in-law stood near the doorway, her eyes darting nervously toward the broken drawers. "You okay, Leela?" Daniel asked. She forced a smile. "Just shocked, that's all." Who would do something like this? Margaret wanted to believe her. She needed to believe her. But something in Leela's tone, too light, too practiced, gnawed at her. Later that night, After the police had gone, Margaret sat in her empty living room. The smell of dust and fingerprints lingered in the air. Daniel offered to stay, but she insisted she'd be fine. When the door finally closed behind him, she let the tears come. The old house creaked, the clock ticking loud in the silence. Every sound felt suspicious, every shadow too long. Her sanctuary had been invaded, not for money, not for valuables, but for pieces of her past. And deep down something told her this wasn't random. Someone close had done this, someone who knew where to look. 3 days passed, yet Margaret couldn't shake the unease. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside, sounded like footsteps. Sleep came in fragments, shallow, haunted by the image of someone rifling through her memories. The police had no new leads, probably a random break-in, they said, but Margaret knew better. Then, on the 4th morning, she found an envelope in her mailbox. Plain, unmarked, no stamp, no return address, just her name, Mrs. Hale, written in unfamiliar ink. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was her husband's watch, the same one that had vanished from her nightstand. And beneath it, a photograph. In the picture, her daughter-in-law Leela smiled brightly at a party, the stolen pearl necklace gleaming around her throat. Margaret's breath caught, her knees nearly gave out, the world tilted, her heart aching with disbelief and fury. Leela, the woman she'd welcomed into her family, the woman she trusted. She drove straight to her son's house, rage and heartbreak burning behind her calm face. Daniel greeted her warmly, but his smile faltered when he saw the watch in her hand. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "It came in the mail," Margaret said quietly, sliding the photo across the table. "Look at it, Daniel." His eyes flicked over the image, confusion turning into disbelief. "That can't be," he began, then stopped. "Mom, this must be a mistake. Maybe it's edited." Margaret's voice trembled with restrained pain. "Do you think I'd make something like this up?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, I'm just saying Leela wouldn't do that. You're upset. You're grieving. Maybe someone's trying to mess with you." The words cut deeper than she expected. Her own son, her flesh and blood, thought she was delusional. The same boy she'd raised alone after his father died now looked at her as though she were fragile glass. She swallowed the lump in her throat and forced a nod. "You're right, dear. Maybe I'm overreacting, but inside something hardened." That night Margaret sat at her kitchen table long after the moon had climbed high. The photograph lay in front of her, the necklace's gleam mocking her under the lamplight. She traced the image with trembling fingers, her mind shifting from sorrow to resolve. She wouldn't confront Leela again. Not with words. Words could be twisted. She would find proof. The next morning she visited a small electronics shop and bought 2 small cameras, one for the hallway, another for the living room. She installed them herself, carefully tucking them into the corners where they'd go unnoticed. Then she began her performance, the part she never thought she'd play. The forgetful widow, the soft, trusting mother-in-law. She invited Leela over for tea, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Oh, I've been so forgetful lately," she said with a nervous laugh. "Sometimes I even forget to turn on the alarm." Leela's eyes flickered for just a second. It was all Margaret needed. Behind her calm smile, revenge was quietly taking root. 2 nights later, Margaret set her plan into motion. She called Daniel to tell him she'd be going out for dinner again, at Mrs. Turner's place this time, she said, making sure Leela overheard the conversation on speaker. Leela smiled faintly, her eyes calm, but Margaret caught the tiny twitch in her fingers as she reached for her cup of tea. That evening, Margaret didn't go to Mrs. Turner's. She parked her car at the corner of her own street, engine off, lights dim. The house stood in darkness, quiet and patient, as though it too was waiting for the truth to return. At exactly 9:37 p.m., a light flickered inside, faint, brief. Her breath stilled. Through the reflection of her side mirror, she saw a figure move across the window. Leela, her daughter-in-law, dressed in black, a flashlight in one hand, gloves on both, calm, confident, like she'd done it before. Margaret's chest burned with a mix of rage and heartbreak, but she stayed still, silent, recording everything from her phone as the hidden cameras caught every second inside. Leela went straight to the jewelry drawer, no hesitation, then to the small locked chest under the bed. She pried it open, pocketed something, and left. The next morning, Margaret checked the footage. It was all there, clear as daylight. Leela, the thief. Leela, the betrayer. But Margaret didn't call the police. She had a better plan. She invited Daniel and Leela to dinner that very night. She cooked their favorite roast chicken, set the table with her best china, and even poured red wine into crystal glasses. The air felt thick, like before a storm. As they ate, Leela was unusually cheerful, talking about vacation plans and new jewelry designs she was inspired to make. Daniel smiled, oblivious, happy to see his family together again. After dessert, Margaret stood up quietly and said, "I'd like to show you both something." She turned on the television. The screen flickered to life, and there she was, Leela, breaking into the house, her face uncovered, her gloved hands opening Margaret's drawers. The room fell silent except for Daniel's sharp inhale. "What is this?" he stammered. Leela's face drained of color. "That's not me," she began, but her voice cracked. Margaret looked at her, eyes steady, voice calm. "You stole from me, Leela. But worse than that, you stole my trust. You stole my family's peace." Leela tried to plead, reaching for Daniel's arm, but he pulled away. His face was pale, stunned, as though the ground had disappeared beneath him. "Get out," he said quietly. "Just go." Leela's tears came too late. She ran out of the house, leaving behind the last pieces of her deception. Margaret didn't follow. She simply sat back down, her heart heavy, but strangely light. She hadn't shouted, hadn't cursed. Justice didn't need to be cruel, just honest. In the weeks that followed, Daniel apologized over and over. He helped her fix the door, repair the damage, and promised to protect what remained of their bond. Leela's betrayal spread through whispers in the neighborhood until it was no longer a secret. One morning, Rosa asked softly, "Do you feel safer now, Mrs. Hale?" Margaret looked out the window, sunlight spilling over her garden, and smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, "because peace isn't the absence of betrayal. It's the courage to face it." And as she watered the lilies that morning, the same ones her husband once planted, she realized revenge didn't always need to roar. Sometimes it bloomed quietly in the heart that refused to break.